Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It is Niccolls here. The world is topsy-turvy, upside down, because look at this. I have a lens I've never seen before, the world's first full-frame modern mirrorless f1.8 zoom. It is the Sigma 28-45 Art Series f1.8, and we're going to play with this today. You know, as a photographer, I don't just rely on my camera to get things done. There's so much more to it than that. In order to learn the creative skills that I need to learn and grow, I turn to the world's largest online learning community, which is Skillshare. They have thousands of video classes on pretty much everything from illustration, graphic design, photography, music, productivity, organization, which I need, and so much more. Skillshare really has classes for everyone. And if you aren't sure where to start, Skillshare makes it easy with their learning paths, which are hand-built classes meant to be taken in order, building on each other, reinforcing lessons. They're available and range from beginner to advanced and cover a huge range of categories so you can expand your skills. Now look, I'm the first to admit that I am not organized when it comes to business. Jordan will agree with that for sure. So when I saw the learning path, organization and planning for creative freelancers, I knew they would help me bring order to my creative projects and ideas. Now I like that Learning Paths provides classes from different instructors because as I learn, I'm learning new and different ways to stay organized from different perspectives. So make 2024 the year that you expand your creativity and join me on a learning journey. Now also, the first 500 people to click the link in the description below will get a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. So get started today, and big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Okay, maybe we actually have seen something kind of like this before, but not to the same exact dimensions. Sigma was famous for making an Art Series lens back in the day, the 18-35 f1.8, one of Jordan's favorites, but that's not exactly equivalent because that was made for APS-C sensors. They did also make a full-frame 24-35 millimeter lens. That was an f2. Now that goes wider than this, and it does give us basically the same amount of light, just a third of a stop less, but this really gives us a versatile range with as much light as you can get. All right, guys, let's take a look at the physical handling dimensions of the new Sigma 28-45 1.8. The first thing that I noticed right off the bat, of course, is it is a big lens, and it's actually fairly heavy too. We'll talk about that here just a bit. This doesn't have a huge zoom range. I mean, 28-45 millimeters, f1.8, it is certainly bright. And really, you gotta think of this as trying to replace a bag of prime lenses, because this would very easily cover a 28, a 35, and say a 45 or 50 millimeter lens. Weight-wise, this is about 950 grams. I mean, that's almost a plena in weight. And we did a little bit of math here. If we compare this to something like the Sony 28 f2, the 35 1.8, and the 50 mm 1.8 all together, that only comes up to 660 grams and probably takes up a similar amount of space in the bag. So you are paying for a little bit with weight to get this convenience. Now to go along with this big lens, we've got a big hood here on the front with the push button release, which we'd like to see on the Sigma lenses. 82 mm filter threads, that's to be expected. But we have to remember that although we are comparing this to 3 tiny plastic primes, this is an Art Series lens. It's built to an incredibly high standard. Fully weather sealed, beautiful construction, really nice smoothness on the manual focus and zoom rings with a nice quick short throw, twin customizable buttons here, and we do have an aperture ring. I can set this to make click stops or to be declicked, and it's nice and silent and smooth turning for video, and it does also have an autofocus manual focus selector switch. What it doesn't have is the disengage for focus, where I can manually focus, for example, say astrophotography, and then disengage the focus altogether, and it won't reset even if the camera's turned on and off. I really like that. It's missing here, and that seems kind of strange because I could see using this for some low light or astrophotography. Otherwise though, this lens is very well built and very solid, like all Sigma Art lenses are. So Sigma Art Series lenses incorporate their linear motors, and of course they're very quick. I've actually been noticing that the synergy between Sony and Sigma products, as far as autofocusing speed goes, it's actually really good. And I put this up against pretty much any of the G Masters for speed, because as you can see here, focusing is very snappy. From minimum focusing distance to infinity, it's just pow, 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 back and forth, back and forth. So smooth video focusing, absolutely, but also really nice for shooting on the street. You know, I just can't appreciate the beautiful architecture of shiny metal-fitted bridges anymore because all I think about is LoCA, longitudinal chromatic aberration, that is. You know, that's where you get those color fringes in the foreground and background out of focus areas, and it's really hard to get rid of in post, and you've heard me say that probably a couple hundred times. So actually I did a LoCA test on our test chart at home, which is far more controlled. Because this is such a bright aperture lens, LoCA can rear its ugly head. But luckily, as you can see here, it's incredibly minor. I'm seeing only the faintest whisper of sort of a blue cyan tinge to the background and a bit of a yellow warm amber tinge to the foreground, but it's very minor. I don't think you'd have any issues with this LoCA. All right guys, so I've never actually taken a picture with this topsy-turvy house, and I'm gonna take a picture of my beautiful male model, Jordan Drake, here in front of the topsy-turvy house with flash, because we got bright light back there, but we got shade here in this light. I've just brought the Westcott FJ200.
The little guy.
The little guy, because it's so nice to carry around in the backpack here all day, and I can use a small stand, but it's still gonna give us plenty of power. So let's go ahead, take a shot here. All right, and then I want you to look, yeah, look up to it, cross your arms, nice and strong. Oh.
Not fat, hot.
You're fat hot. PHAT. Lovely, there you go. So it's so nice to be able to just take this stuff out, battery powered, easy to take anywhere, no cables or anything required, and that is why Westcott is PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner. Look, there's lens test charts all over the place, so this seems like a good time to talk about sharpness. Of course, we did use our own lens test chart, not this big metal box. But let's talk about the Sigma 28 to 45, first starting at the 28mm in the center range. So shooting 1.8, you can see here, we are getting pretty good detail, but it's not giving us the maximum 60 megapixel resolution that the Sony a7R5 can deliver. Also, it's not really very contrasty either. That absolutely does get better when you stop down to f4. You can see now we're getting contrast and detailed. Looking in the corners at 1.8, it's pretty soft. Going to f4 does help quite a bit if you do specifically want to shoot in the corners. Okay, now let's take a look at the 45mm range. This seems to be a little bit better. Looking at the center here wide open at 1.8, I'm getting a little bit more detail. Still not that much contrast though, so stopping down to f4, as you can see again, does help even at the 45mm range. Corners are a little bit more consistent here. So at 1.8, you can see still a little bit blurry, but really nice corners by the time you stop down to f4. I think for video applications, this would be fine. No problem shooting 1.8. For photo applications, I certainly would. I'm just not gonna get my best detail until I stop down a bit. So you guys probably know me by now. When I'm playing with a zoom like this, I do always enjoy having the extra versatility to do close-up and detail shots. And I'm happy to say this lens is actually pretty decent. It does its best work at 45mm. Now, my minimum focusing distance is 30 centimeters, just around 12 inches from the sensor to the subject. But considering the lens isn't super long, I do get a fair amount of working distance, about that to be able to shoot with. So that's working out okay. And at 45mm, I'm getting 1 to 4 life-size reproductions. So, you know, for casual close-ups, just walking down the street getting detail stuff, I think this is doing a great job. So it seems like all the other videos we've been doing lately have been with overcast weather. Now we've got this beautiful sunny day. I'm not complaining because I can get flare tests finally, but I should have taken this jacket off a long time ago. Anyways, Sigma usually have really good coatings. I usually don't get a lot of flare problems, and this lens is no exception. In fact, it's really good. You can see here shooting wide open. I'm not seeing really any major loss of contrast, and even stopping down the lens quite heavily, we're not getting any ghosting. It's doing a great job. Now the sunstars are kind of average, they're not bad, but you can see here we're getting 11 bladed aperture, giving us lots of points to these stars. They lose a little bit of definition, they kind of bleed a little bit together, but they still give that kind of dramatic little flare, so I don't mind it. Okay, let's talk about bokeh now on this 28 to 45mm lens, because an f1.8 lens can certainly achieve some nice shallow depth of field, especially on full frame. And here you can see the bokeh at 1.8, actually quite beautiful. Strong cat's eye effect, I kind of like that, but very clean specular highlights. No soap bubble effect, just a hint of onion flavoring. I mean, this is actually doing a really good job. And as we stop down the aperture, you can see everything stays clean and tight, nice round specular highlights. I also really like the transitions from in focus to out of focus, where you can get nice soft backgrounds, and that makes sense because the specular highlights here are so clean.
Gather round, my fellow video shooters, and let's discuss the merits of the new 28 to 45. And you've got to remember, this is kind of building on the legacy of the older 18 to 35, which was an enormously popular video lens, especially because back then, full frame cameras that recorded a really good video picture were pretty hard to come by, and that gave you a full frame aesthetic. Now we've got a full frame lens that's giving you basically like a bag of primes aesthetic, and I can see that being incredibly useful. One of the very smart things that Sigma's done with this lens is it doesn't shift weight very dramatically when you zoom, and it is an internal zoom. That's going to make this an absolutely fantastic gimbal lens as long as you don't need ultra wide recording. Now, the other thing I was very curious about was breathing, because the 18 to 35 did definitely exhibit some of that, and we're seeing the exact same thing here. You can see at 28 millimeters, our frame does move a fair amount, so if you are pulling focus from one character to another, that might be a little bit distracting. It's much better controlled at 45 millimeters, but it is still present in it. That is the one drawback to what is otherwise just an absolutely fantastic video lens for E-mount and L-mount shooters.
So walking the streets of Calgary here with this lens today, these are my thoughts. So, you know, first looking at this from the approach of, could this replace some prime lenses? Well, in my particular case, I would probably still go with the prime lenses. Keep in mind, I don't like 35mm lenses, so I would just be rocking a 28 and a 50, and I feel like I could switch back and forth between that, not really, you know, find that super inconvenient. Where I could see this really being useful is absolutely for video work and for event photography. Now, if I was shooting weddings or something like that, this has that low light advantage. You get all the light you can get. Music concerts, this would also be great. So when push comes to shove, I think this would be a good choice. I would personally probably still want to rock a 24 to 70 f2.8 for myself if I was shooting things like weddings or journalism. I feel like one stop of light in exchange I get more focal range. That would be my preference. But for those that need the maximum amount of light and don't want to carry a bunch of prime lenses for event work, this will save you the trouble of having to switch lenses, and it will give you the same amount of light gathering. Regardless, however you look at this, Sigma has made a unique lens. And you know, maybe part of it is Sigma just being like, look what we can do. We can make a full frame bright aperture lens that nobody's ever tried before. And that makes sense because Sigma is really pushing the envelope a lot lately. And it's actually way less money than I thought it would be. The price point on this is very reasonable considering how much light it gathers. And so for that very reason alone, I think a lot of people will find this to be good value. I hope you guys enjoyed a look here at the Sigma 28 to 45 1.8 Art Series lens. Do leave your comments below. Let us know if you agree with our findings, or you have different needs that you feel this lens would absolutely fit. That would be excellent to know about. Also, check out the podcast. We always read the comments and we love to talk about them on the podcast. It's on this very same channel or all your favorite podcasting apps. If you want to listen, just search for PetaPixel Podcast. Thanks so much, guys. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.